Brittney Griner is a two-time WNBA champion and a Hall of Famer. When a player with that resume requests a trade away from a contending team to a team that finished near the bottom of the league, it warrants examination. That is what happened in Atlanta. The Dream had just completed their best regular season in franchise history. Then the front office acquired Angel Reese from the Chicago Sky, surrendering 2 first-round picks in the process. Within 5 days of that announcement, Griner had formally requested a trade. She was subsequently moved to the Connecticut Sun. Reports from within the organization described the environment as toxic. Griner's characterization, according to accounts before a single practice had taken place. Veterans with championship experience rarely abandon contention for rebuilding situations unless their reasons are serious. The pattern in Chicago had been visible for some time. During Reese's tenure with the Sky, locker room tensions became a recurring issue. One widely reported incident involved Reese making public disparaging remarks about veteran guard Courtney Vanderloot following an injury. Vanderloot is regarded as one of the more accomplished players in the league's recent history. The consequences became apparent after the trade. Within weeks of Reese's departure, the Chicago Sky signed Skylar Diggins-Smith to a 2-year contract. Diggins-Smith is a 7-time All-Star with a record of joining organizations she believes can compete. Azura Stevens followed with a 3-year commitment. Neither player had previously expressed interest in Chicago during the Reese era. The Sky also reassigned Reese's number 5 jersey to Rickea Jackson almost immediately, with no transitional period or acknowledgement. Atlanta's motivation for the trade appears to have been driven largely by their playoff history against the Indiana Fever. The Fever, led by Caitlin Clark, eliminated the Dream from the postseason while Clark was managing a reported physical limitation. The Dream's front office appeared to prioritize acquiring Reese's rebounding profile as a counter. What that assessment may have overlooked is that a significant portion of Reese's rebound totals came from recovering her own missed field goal attempts, a metric that does not translate directly to team defensive performance. Griner's decision to accept a move to Connecticut rather than remain in Atlanta amounts to a professional judgment. She has played in championship environments. Her choice to leave one suggests she did not believe this one would become that. Atlanta enters the season without their veteran center, without 2 future first-round picks, and with a player whose previous team experienced a measurable improvement in organizational stability immediately following her exit. The Fever, meanwhile, have had additional time for their roster to develop cohesion. Whether Reese adjusts to a new organizational context remains to be seen. The franchise's broader question is whether the cost of acquiring her, in draft capital, in veteran departures, and in locker room continuity, was an exchange that improves their position relative to Indiana. The early indicators, at minimum, give reasonable cause for doubt. What the Atlanta Dream's front office is counting on and what their public statements have consistently emphasized is that the environment Reese is entering in Atlanta is fundamentally different from the one she left in Chicago. That argument has some structural merit. Head coach Carl Smesko, who oversaw Atlanta's rise from last in offensive rating in 2024 to second in 2025, has described Reese as someone who will make the team more versatile and capable of generating extra possessions. ESPN Smesko has also said, when it comes to developing Reese's shooting efficiency, his staff will sit down with her, come up with a plan together, and involve the player in formulating her own development goals. ESPN, that is a measured, professional posture from a coach who has already demonstrated the ability to expand players beyond their previous limitations. Naz Hillman is a case study in what Smesko's system can do. She entered the 2025 season with a single-made three-pointer across her entire career and finished with 53, while also winning the league's 6th Player of the Year award. Swish appeal. The coaching staff's capacity to develop players in ways previous organizations could not is real and documented. The question is whether that track record extends to behavioral dynamics, not just skill development. Atlanta re-signed Alicia Gray, Brianna Jones, Jordan Canada, Naz Hillman, and Ryan Howard in the days following the Reese trade, retaining the core of a team that finished with 30 wins and first place in the Eastern Conference during the 2025 regular season. WNBA on paper, Reese arrives not as a franchise-altering transplant, but as an addition to an already functioning unit. That distinction matters. In Chicago, she was the centerpiece of a roster that finished near the bottom of the league in both of her 2 seasons. In Atlanta, the infrastructure around her is already established. Several Atlanta players, including Howard and Gray, had already developed familiarity with Reese through the unrivaled league and Team USA, which the Dream's front office cited as a reason for confidence going into the season. High-post hoops prior relationships between players do not resolve competitive or cultural tensions on their own, but they do represent a more favorable starting condition than Reese experienced when she arrived in Chicago as a 21-year-old rookie placed immediately at the center of a struggling franchise. The circumstances of her departure from Chicago are worth reviewing with precision, because the original incident has been subject to considerable distortion in commentary. In a recorded interview with the Chicago Tribune during the 2025 season, Reese questioned whether veteran point guard Courtney Vandersloot, who had torn her ACL, could be relied upon to return effectively given her age, and stated that the team needed a younger player with championship experience in that role. CBS Sports. She also said the head coach needed to push his players harder, and indicated that if the organization did not make significant changes, she might need to consider other options. Sports Illustrated. The Sky organization suspended her for one half of a game, citing conduct detrimental to the team. Reese did not play in the second half of that game, nor in any of the remaining games of the season, with the team citing a back injury. CBS Sports. Following the initial controversy, Reese issued a public apology to her teammates, acknowledging that her language had not reflected her intentions, and that she had not meant to diminish what her teammates had contributed throughout the season. Sports Illustrated. The broader context of her frustration was not without basis. Former Sky player Beck Allen had separately described her time in Chicago as a bit miserable and criticized the organization's lack of investment in its players. High-post hoops. The Sky's front office had also made trades in the preceding offseason that drew criticism, including one that sent the third overall pick in the 2025 draft, who became an all-star in her rookie year, to Washington for a player who produced less. CBS Sports. Reese's complaints about the quality of the roster were not baseless. The team finished 10-34 in 2025, tying for the worst record in the league. None of that context, however, changes the professional calculation that accompanies being a second-year player who publicly questions an injured teammate's ability to contribute. The manner of the criticism, as much as its content, is what created lasting friction within the locker room. In a league where rosters are small, relationships are close, and word travels quickly between franchises, how a player speaks about colleagues in public carries lasting weight. The Atlanta Dream's GM, Dan Padover, addressed the locker room question directly at a press conference following the trade. Padover stated that the organization was not concerned about potential chemistry issues, and described Reese as someone her new teammates deeply respect. High-post hoops. That is a standard reassurance from a front office that has just made a significant acquisition. Whether it reflects the genuine internal temperature of the locker room or represents a managed public position will become clear only once the season begins. The competitive context in which Atlanta enters 2026 is defined primarily by what happened to them in the playoffs the year before. The Dream finished the 2025 regular season at 30-14, first in the Eastern Conference, before losing to the Indiana Fever in the first round of the playoffs. Yardbarker. That loss carries particular weight given that Indiana achieved it with a depleted roster. Caitlin Clark played in only 13 games in 2025 before ankle and groin injuries ended her season early. The IX Sports Atlanta lost to a Fever team operating without its most significant player for the majority of the year. Indiana has since addressed the injury and depth concerns that defined their 2025 campaign. The Fever re-signed Kelsey Mitchell, who averaged 20.2 points per game in 2025 on her way to an All-WNBA first-team selection and an MVP finalist finish, to a 3-year Supermax contract. Heavy. They also brought back Lexi Hull, Sophie Cunningham, and added forward Monique Billings, giving Clark a returning core that was already intact and functional before her injuries derailed the 2025 season. Heavy. More than half of Indiana's 2025 playoff roster is returning for 2026, and a healthy Clark represents the single most consequential addition any team in the league will make this offseason, without having to spend a draft pick. The structural gap between Atlanta's challenge and Indiana's position is at minimum not narrowing. The Fever are entering the season with continuity, a healthy franchise player, and no significant roster disruptions. Atlanta is entering it with a new addition whose integration carries genuine uncertainty, a significant draft capital expenditure with no immediate return, and the notable absence of the veteran center who anchored their front court in 2025. Griner's single season with the Dream produced career lows across every major statistical category, with 9.8 points, 5.2 rebounds, and 1.2 blocks per game, while averaging under 21 minutes per contest and coming off the bench by season's end. Athlon Sports. Those numbers reflect a player whose role was reduced within a system built around perimeter play and guard-driven offense. They do not indicate a player in decline so much as a player who was no longer a structural fit. At Connecticut, Griner joins a young roster that includes Anissa Morrow, Sania Rivers, Layla Lacan, Aaliyah Edwards, and Diamond Miller, a core the Suns' front office is building around, with a need for the kind of veteran presence and post-scoring ability that Griner provides. ESPN. The franchise is also preparing to relocate to Houston in 2027, and Griner, who is from Houston, has publicly noted the significance of that possibility as part of her decision. WBUR News. Her move to Connecticut is therefore not simply a reaction to circumstances in Atlanta. It is a deliberate choice that accounts for where she is in her career, where the franchise is heading, and what she can still offer in a role suited to her capabilities. The WNBA's new collective bargaining agreement, which saw average salaries rise nearly fourfold and allowed players to earn over $1 million annually for the first time in league history, has also restructured the economics of these decisions. ESPN veterans like Griner now have leverage they did not previously possess. The option to prioritize fit, role clarity, and long-term positioning over simply remaining with the highest-profile franchise available is a product of a league that has materially changed its relationship with player compensation. Griner's seven-figure deal with Connecticut is itself a reflection of that shift. For Atlanta, the commercial reaction to the Reese trade has been unambiguous. The team's president and chief operating officer reported that within the first 4 hours after the trade was announced, the Dream sold half as many jerseys as they had sold across the entire 2025 season. WSB-TV. The franchise is also scheduled to play 5 home games at State Farm Arena in 2026, expanding their footprint in the Atlanta market beyond their standard venue. WNBA. The business case for the acquisition is straightforward. Whether the basketball case holds up to the same degree is a question the 2026 season will answer. What the Dream have assembled, at full strength, is a team with legitimate championship contention credentials. Ryan Howard, a 3-time All-Star and the franchise's cornerstone, is back. Alicia Gray, who finished 4th in MVP voting in 2025, is back. The supporting cast that enabled one of the most efficient offensive systems in the league last season remains largely intact. Reese's rebounding volume and post presence add dimensions that were previously absent. The coaching staff has earned credibility through tangible results. The burden of proof, however, sits with Atlanta rather than Indiana. The Fever's core has already beaten this Dream team in the postseason. They have since gotten healthier and added depth. Atlanta has responded by spending future first-round picks on a player whose previous team finished with the worst record in the league for 2 consecutive seasons and ended her tenure there under formal disciplinary action. The argument that a different environment will produce a different outcome is reasonable. It is also untested. The 2026 WNBA season opens on May 17th. Atlanta's first game is at home against the Las Vegas Aces, the defending champions. The answers to most of these questions will begin to surface within the first month of play. The offseason arguments on all sides will give way to the only accounting that matters in professional sports: what happens on the floor.